Good morning and welcome to the Daily Cyber Briefing for Wednesday, the 25th of September. I'm Stephen Ridgway. There is a report out which points out vulnerabilities in automated tank gauge systems. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, basically, these are systems which measure the conditions of fuel storage tanks. So how much fuel is in them, what the temperatures are there any leaks, manage inventory, how many gallons of X, Y, and Z has been used, those sorts of things. They are increasingly required by legislation, and in this particular article points out that in the US, for example, there are many forms of storage tank that require them. In fact, any fuel tank over a certain amount of size requires them. So referred to as ATGs because they are automated as opposed to old-fashioned ones, which would send information back to, I guess, a control room somewhere in the fuel depot. The issue being that, as with a lot of industrial control system software, it was never designed to be networked. Networking was bolted on at some point over the last 20 odd years without much thought, any real thought being put into cybersecurity. The security of these things was assumed to be in place at an architectural level. However, the world has moved on, and almost everything these days, in some form or another, ends up connected to the internet. So we've got a problem that software that was not designed and secured against external-based attacks is now vulnerable, or is now at least part of the threat landscape. Combined with, these things are very difficult to maintain. So if you imagine the lifespan of a fuel tank, let's take a fuel tank system for a petrol station. Okay, the tank's underground. Okay, changing the hardware associated with monitoring that is not straightforward. These things are long-standing, and issues then will potentially cross many owners. As a station is bought and sold and moves into different ownership. Who is responsible for ensuring at any one point that all of this stuff is up to date? And the manufacturer of the original, let's say, valves and things, or in this case, the gauges, who's to say that manufacturer is still in business, or potentially who is to say that particular version of the gauge is still supported and still gets updates? How are updates actually going to be pushed out to these things? There's a lot of risk associated with this particular arena, and then just to put that into context, this isn't just something that tells you how full the petrol tank is underneath the petrol station, for example. They are often connected to other systems, sirens, emergency shut-off valves, ventilation systems, fuel dispensers, for example. Now, if these sorts of things can be controlled by adversaries, that is, I think, a significant risk at a critical national infrastructure level. So, yeah, What can we do about this stuff? Well, as ordinary people, very little. However, if we, those of us that work in information security, cybersecurity, I think ensuring that, as far as we can, ensuring that our voices are heard when systems are being designed and when systems are being connected to the internet, is really important. And bearing in mind that the usual stuff that you think about, servers, laptops, mobile devices, bit of networking, securing your cloud, all that sort of stuff, may not be the most, may not have the highest business risk. In an organisation, if you're working in an organisation, transport, fuel companies, whatever it may be, gas, oil and gas, in our experience, certainly a lot of the smaller players, I can't speak for the big players, but the smaller players in this arena globally are not consistently putting cybersecurity first. They've got many years of physical security and understanding of how to secure pipelines, tanks, and all these other sorts of things, storage tanks and things, but they haven't necessarily thought through the potential impact of cyber attack on these systems, and they tend to be, sadly, a little significantly under resourced. We've spoken to oil pipeline companies and refineries and whatever that have got a single person that's responsible for cybersecurity, despite the fact that the potential risk, the environmental risk of things going wrong is huge locally, but the global risk, or the national risk at least, is quite high because, as we're all aware, if you lose access to whatever this particular sort of fuel is, it's not easy to replace. The war in Ukraine and sanctions against importing Russian oil has demonstrated how difficult that could be, and how important fuel and power security is at a national level. So these things need some thought. There should, the policies around not running out of support things, be that hardware or software, most definitely does apply in this level. And perhaps we need to just raise awareness of the fact that this is an issue, and that if you are making recommendations about information security for organisations that have, for example, fuel tanks, that area ought to be perhaps high on the list of cyber risks, despite the fact that most effort generally seems to be put into the usual stuff around ransomware and office-based systems and those sorts of things. Okay, so I came across a couple of articles that talk about who's tracking you at the moment. Well, there's been an update to an annual survey that is carried out by Kaspersky. Now, I know that Kaspersky has just been banned in the US, and there's all sorts of this, that, and the other around it. However, let's just assume for a moment that they're not wholeheartedly bad guys, and probably not bad guys at all, but there's just too much risk. Anyway, they do an annual survey of who's tracking you. They've got a tool as part of the Kaspersky environment, which is what they call a DNT, Do Not Track tool. That has been collecting statistics over the last 12 months. Kaspersky has done analysis then on 39 billion events that have been been intercepted by DNT tooling. Unsurprisingly, Google comes out as being the undisputed leader in tracking everything that you do. There are, I think, four Google systems which are intensively tracking everything that you do online. There's the Google Display and Video 360, which monitors advertising related activities, clicks, and metrics, and those things. Google Analytics, which is a more general user behavior and keyword tracker. There's the ad tracking system, AdSense, and then there is YouTube Analytics that gives updates about pretty much everything you watch and everything that you search for within YouTube. It is, we talk a lot about, well, does this privacy stuff actually matter? I'm of the opinion that it only matters if it matters to you. But as it's not easy to control, you're not offered the option of whether this stuff is being tracked by Google or anybody else for that matter, in a kind of real-time, granular, easy to manage level. It is potentially a bit of a problem. We're all aware of how much data is worth. In the Western world, we see it as financial value. So Google is almost definitely collecting this stuff because they can then use it to make money out of mostly out of advertising. And we also know, say for example, that the Chinese gather everything about everybody, mainly because they don't know whether this stuff might have strategic or nation-state kind of level value at some point. But if they've got it, they can always look back through it later and see what's going on. Wouldn't it be lovely to know all the websites that Biden browsers? Well, probably not that many, probably not very interesting, but you know what I mean. So if you are concerned about privacy, bear in mind Google is still top of the list when it comes to tracking what you're doing through your browser and through their other tools. So even if you're not using Chrome, if you use Google as your search engine, if you use YouTube for watching videos, these sorts of things, bear in mind that all of that stuff is not just being held in association with your account, it's being held by Google for them to do analytics on. And a second article I came across talks about a new report published by the Federal Trade Commission, which has found that Facebook, under the guise of Meta or Meta via Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp, and many others, are involved in mass surveillance practices, which has resulted in them banking effectively billions of dollars. The investigation has been going on since December 2020, so it covers a very large amount of information. It's a 129-page report and exposes companies such as Amazon's Twitch, Reddit, Twitter, X, TikTok's ByteDance, and whatever. It shows how they accumulate vast amounts of personal data. It is mostly collected without the full awareness of users, so their right to collect it is buried deep in some terms and conditions of use over which you have no control. You either don't use the software or accept the T's and C's. They are talking about the fact that a lot of this data goes beyond expectation. So you may expect a certain amount of data to be collected because you using X. So there will be a certain amount of information they need. Obviously, they need to know what your tweets are, or your, what do you call them now? They're not tweets, posts, I guess, on that. But they're collecting a whole lot of other stuff as well. They are also this information is being bought and sold in the background via third-party information brokers, including stuff like income levels, locations, personal interests, and so on, used to specifically categorize you and target advertising at you. Mostly there is a lack of user control, as in it's kind of either they collect it or you don't use the solution. So sometimes there are, and it has increasingly over the last few years been introduction of some ability around to control whether the ads you see are personalised or generic, or that uses the information. But it doesn't say that the information isn't being collected anyway. It's just what do you see that they're using it for, as opposed to what do they collect and what do they sell in the background. FTC is recommending increased transparency in this area. But again, in the meantime, it is something to be aware of, and it is something to be, if it's certainly for key people in your organisation. There needs to be some thought and some education, I suspect, around what they do, because, and this actually touches on kind of your personal life as well as your work life as well. If you're a key person within an organisation, if there is specific key risk around you, it may well be that you're being targeted. Now, bear in mind, we're talking about recently about who gets targeted and how. It isn't only C-level executives that get targeted. We know, for example, that some threat groups will deliberately target junior administrator, kind of junior IT people, because A, they're easier to phish, and B, they have access to things which gives them kind of a level of value to the attacker, which is higher than perhaps their position in their career or their position within the organisation would otherwise warrant. I.e., if you can get admin rights to things, you've got access to all sorts of stuff. If you can scam somebody junior to get access rights, that's an awful lot easier than trying to go directly to scamming the CFO or whatever it may be. So information about people is then valuable from not just from the perspective of legitimately or kind of pseudo-legitimately targeting them with advertising. It is actually useful to adversaries who are looking to specifically target individuals in order to gain access to systems that they shouldn't get access to. So it is worth thinking about these things and make sure then that my recommendation then would be to ensure that this stuff is actually covered in one way or another within your risk register. Who may be targeted and for what reasons, and then what information would be useful to an attacker in order to create scenarios that are likely to scam that particular person. And that includes, the more information you know about somebody, the better that's going to be. So, very interesting that this stuff is all out there and this stuff is all for sale. Because you may think, well, but nobody can get hold of ByteDance's data. Well, you can bet your bottom dollar that if the Chinese government wants anything from ByteDance, all they've got to do is ask. You can also bet your bottom dollar that X will sell your data, or certainly Google or Amazon or whoever will sell your data via data brokers, and that the assumption that criminals won't use a legitimate market to buy information, I think that's a foolish assumption to make. Anyway, that's enough from me for today. Hope you have a good Wednesday, and I'll speak to you all again.